Right. Good evening and welcome everybody to this evening's class. We are starting with Module 3, which is a standalone module and a very, very important module, especially when it comes to your exams. A lot of questions from the exams come out of this module. So please do make sure that you pay close attention to what Sophia has to teach us and make sure you take lots of notes. Perfect. Thanks, Sophia. You can begin.
Thanks, Pedro. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Module 3, Assessments in the ECD setting. For those who are new, please note that you will be asked from time to time with prior warning to engage in the lesson by reading the slides that appear on the screen. For the duration of the program, you will always be on mute, and when it's your time to read, your name will be called out and you will be asked to unmute yourself. All right, so we're going to dive right into it. Everybody gets frightened when they hear the term assessment, but in the ECD setting, it's something that is just a normal part of our daily observations on the children that we are engaging with. All right, so for this session, our outcomes are listed as follows. Explain the importance of observing and recording a child's status daily. Use the developmental checklist to improve on your observational skills. Identify and explain ways in which caregivers can recognize potential hindrances in development using the developmental assessment checklist. All right. So to put that in a nutshell, we would basically just say that you are going to observe and record everything about the children in your class on a daily basis to make this task of assessments easy on yourself. So in ECD setting, our assessments and our records could include simple stuff like photographs or videos that you have taken in the class. It could be written notes. I have one of my teachers, what she does is she has an observation book where she has a different page for each child. And for the entire week, she notes down something that stands out about each child, whether that is something that is viewed in a negative form or in a positive form. She makes notes of this. And this helps her in her lesson plan for the following week, where she can afford those children opportunities to perfect those skills that they are lacking in. All right. So we understand from this that the purpose in an ECD setting for assessments is not to fail or to pass children. It's to identify obstacles, hindrances, slight delays, or problem areas that need to be worked on. It helps us plan ahead so that we can improve the problem areas that the children or the child might be facing. All right, straight into our slides we go. Pedro, right. So we've listed now a few guidelines for effective assessments. Remember, you can take assessments, but if you don't know what you are assessing children on or why or how or what the milestones are that you are measuring these assessments again, you're going to be lost, and your assessments and your observations are going to be a waste of time, basically. All right. So firstly, we say that information should always be just and fair and never show any form of bias towards the children. You cannot assess a 2-year-old child on milestones that are only expected from a 4 to 5-year-old child. So it must be age appropriate, right? Secondly, we say they should consider the fact that children develop in their own unique ways. Therefore, they will have different interests. So just because a child is not readily going outside to do activities that include large motor skill development doesn't mean that the child is stupid in that area. It just means that we need to expose the child or create more opportunities for the child to venture or adventure into that direction so that he can develop that part of his skill set, right? And then lastly, we say assessments should note that children come from different backgrounds and should respect their values, traditions, and their beliefs. All right, so again, we bring in the concept of diversity and how this could be impacting a child's development. Okay, we go on to our next slide now. Okay, implications of assessment. So what would us assessing the children imply? Basically, we're saying that it is to observe individual growth and development of children, to take note of their physical health, to observe their skills and abilities, and to test their knowledge. All right. Remember again, it's very, very important for us to understand that when we do assessments in an ECD setting, it's never a matter of fail or pass. It's a matter of the skill set that we are looking at either has not developed yet, is in the process of developing, or lastly, it has been developed properly, right? So we are always looking on that matrix as opposed to right or wrong or fail or pass. It's either not developed yet, in the process of developing, or developed completely. Next. If you have any questions, guys, please remember to use the chat feature, type it in there as we go along. I will try to answer the questions as they come up. All right. Now we speak about the family involvement in assessments. We say that assessments need to understand children's family culture and traditions. So, which means that we need to reflect the aspects of different cultures and different traditions in our assessments. All right. So, for example, if you decide that you are going to have a cultural day or a heritage day, you need to understand that, for example, children who are from an Islamic faith are not going to be able to participate or to engage in the dishes that maybe serve pork or serve unhalal food, right? And that's not because the child doesn't know how to hold the burger or the whatever the case may be. We need to be sensitive to these differences so that we don't mark children down unfairly, right? The child may not be able to verbalize to you why he doesn't want to participate in a certain activity, but you having background on that child's maybe cultural difference, on that child's religious difference, on that child's ethnicity difference, you should be able to understand why a child is perhaps reluctant or refusing to participate in a certain activity. Secondly, we say that they should arrange the time and the place of the assessment, and it should be done in the family's own comfort. I don't know how practical that is, but when it is possible, then if your teachers don't mind, if your principal doesn't mind, then so be it, right? Assessors should use the family's native language so that they can better understand the views regarding the children. So we're not saying that you must become proficient in all 11 official languages in South Africa, but there are keywords that many of us are privileged to, that we can learn from those around us to understand or to make the child understand, especially children who are coming from a background where the main language in the or the mother tongue in their home is different from what is being taught in the ECD setting. So we should familiarize ourselves with simple terms like yes and no and eat and sit and come here or take this or thank you or hello, for example, so that the child feels that he is at home, so that the child feels at ease, and the child in his own little way can understand that we are actually making an effort to connect with him, right? Because if there is no connection, if there is no level of compassion or understanding, the child is not going to be open to learning anything from us for that matter, right? And then we say collaboration between teachers and families. Provide families with the understanding that the child's development is of utmost importance to us. All right. And also we say lastly, involving families help identify steps for the intervention to assist the child. So when you're having these different functions at school, it could be a simple thing as creating something called a grandparents day, and you can actually sit with the individual grandmothers and grandfathers, and you can discuss things with them that you maybe find boggling, or that you are struggling with, to understand why the child does a certain thing in a certain manner, and you can get more insight. When the family is familiar with you, when the family knows that you are approachable, when you raise concerns to them regarding their child, they are less likely to take it in an offensive manner, and they would then receive it as information that they need to process and that they need to participate in for the betterment of the child. Whatever we do is always in the best interest of the child. All right, we go on to our next slide now. And after that slide, I'm going to ask Lerato to read for us the slide after this. All right, so I'm going to read this one, and then after this, Lerato is going to read. So there's different methods of gathering information or doing assessments, and we listed them as follows: observations, examinations, talking and listening, and surveys. So we know now from the ECD setting, we don't really participate in examinations. We test the children, but it is very unlikely and it is very unwise of an ECD teacher to tell children that I am going to be testing you today. That just puts them on edge. You want them to be as natural as possible. You don't want them to be nervous. The best way for you to go about doing a formal assessment in an ECD setting would be to do it in a group setting. With the advancement of technology, we are now able to record these observations, and we do not have to carry a book and make notes as we are going along, which also puts children on edge. Right? So my advice to everybody else is record the assessment processes that you do in small groups of maybe 3 to 5 children at a time, bearing in mind the other children in the class need to be occupied with either the teacher's assistant or with a volunteer that comes through at a certain time of the year when the formal assessments happen. All right. And then obviously you can also do assessments through talking and listening. In your group discussions in the morning, you can ask certain questions to ascertain whether children are grasping concepts, cognitive concepts, or not. All right. And then lastly, obviously, surveys. I'm not so sure how the surveys play a role in the ECD setting, but if anybody has an idea, please pop it into the chat box and we can discuss that a little bit more at length. All right. We now go on to our next slide, and Lerato is going to be reading that for us.
The importance of documentation. And it's bulleted, like there are bullet points under that heading, the importance of documentation. Reports serve as a guide to monitor growth and development of children. Families can use reports for processes such as adoption and family tracing, etc., etc. Reports can also be about their ways of life. It provides evidence of children's learning and helps demonstrate the importance of educational experiences. Children's learning becomes shareable and visible, making it easy for families and teachers or assessors to appreciate the progress and development of the child.
Okay, awesome stuff. Thank you, Lerato. All right.
Welcome,
So,
Sophia.
so basically, what Lerato has read for us now is explaining to us that there must be a paper trail. In as much as you are doing those videos, remember that you need to document in writing your discoveries on those recordings. All right. For your own safety, I would advise you do not inform parents that you are doing your assessments in this way. Whenever prompted or whenever requested for progress reports, assessments, or whatever, it must be in writing. All right. It would also be a good time to say now that you should ask the administration of your ECD section, whether that is the principal or the head of your department, to include this clause here that you do assessments in this manner from time to time, so that you do not get sued, because I promise you, the weirdest of things come up and people always just go the suing way. All right. So documentation basically means to take all of that data and to put it in a black and white format so that you are able to trace the child's growth from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. All right. Remember, we keep certain parts of the children's work as well as the as the year goes on. I found an easy way of doing that is to scan it or to take a photo of it and give it to them so they can take it home, basically. But obviously you need to know, and you need to put at the bottom of the paper or the bottom of the art piece, you need to put the child's name and the date there for your own record purposes. All right. So documentation is of utmost importance. All right, we go now on to our next slide, which I will read. And then after that, the slide after that will be read by Shumi. Type of documentation: written reports, photos, recordings, background history. All right, so those are the different ways and the creative ways actually that we can do recordings. Again, I'm going to advise you the best way is the written reports. And the photos, obviously, you can also take them and print them out as supporting evidence for your reports. That photos could be the child doing the work. That photos could be a picture of the completed work or in the process of the work as the steps go along. All right. We go on to our next slide, which is going to be read by Shumi now.
Okay. Hi, everyone.
Hi, Shumi. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks, and you?
I'm fine. Thank you.
Okay.
You can go ahead.
Okay, thanks. So, it talks about benefits of observations. So, these are the points. He says, gain more insight on children's interests and needs. It helps develop a bond between children and caregivers. Observing means that quick treatment can be developed for the betterment of children. Observations can show the child's communication style, shows the children's interactions with their peers, helps determine why a child is behaving a certain way.
Excellent. Excellent stuff. So that is basically the benefits that we get out of the observations, right? Like we said when we started the session, we are able to pick up through the observation where the children may be lacking or where a specific child may be lacking. And we are able to plan ahead for that in the weeks or the months to come to allow the opportunity for the child to practice the skill that he is lacking in or slacking in, and thereby allowing him the opportunity to perfect that skill. All right. Obviously, we're going to do it in a way that is inviting the child to the activity. So if you know that child is more prone to the block corner, you will try to create a concept which would include the block corner and the skill that the child is lacking. I know that sounds a lot to process, but as we go along, hopefully we will get the hang of it. All right. I'm going to read the next slide now, and after that, we're going to ask the leader to read for us. Remember, guys, any questions you have, please pop it in the chat box. If it's difficult to say in the chat box, and then you just go on to the little icon at the bottom that says reactions, and you choose the reaction that's showing your hand is up like you are swearing for an oath. All right, observation settings. Number 1, daily routines activities include observing children's motor, cognitive, social, and moral skills. Number 2, outdoor play includes observing children's skills during individual or group plays. Dramatic play includes observing their language, self-help, and problem-solving skills. And number 4, home visit observations include observing their behavior during the home visits, their traditions, etc., etc. So these are different settings that we can do observations in, and it would give us a little bit more of an insight to the child besides him just sitting quietly at an activity in your classroom. It can happen in the classroom, like we're saying in point number 1, daily routines. Then we say in point number 2, it can happen outdoors while they are playing or in the sports time of the year, or number 3, dramatic plays when they are participating in the concerts and in the different programs that come up. Or number 4, if you have the time and the energy, you go around to their house, to each child's house, and you visit them on different times just to get a better understanding of their background. I wish we had the time to visit all 35 children in a normal setting. But yeah, it's a pretty conventional look that we are looking at right now. Okay, so we go on to our next slide, and Talita will be reading for us. Talita, are you there? Okay, Talita's mic doesn't work. Let's see. Kialebuha, are you there? Okay, iPad. The person who's on iPad, let's see, maybe third time will be lucky. Okay, no luck for us. Anybody else wants to volunteer before I read? I'm getting tired of listening to my own voice. Hi.
Hello. Hello, how are you?
Okay, and you, who am I speaking to?
Nyarazo.
Nyaratso, how are you, my darling?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Fine, thank you. Would you be so kind to read for us guidelines for observing young children?
Yes, please.
All right, carry on.
Okay. Guidelines for observing young children. Get permission from guardians. Provide proper planning. Base your observation on facts. Assess without children knowing. Avoid
Yes.
interrupting their playtime. Be attentive to their body language and communication styles. Refrain from being judgmental and biased as children develop differently. See children as unique individuals with their own beliefs, interests, values, etc., etc.
Awesome stuff. Thanks, Nyaratso.
Pleasure.
All right. So those are just some of the guidelines that we can implement that's going to help us to give an accurate representation of our observation of those children. So the first part that says get permission from guardians, remember that is something that is done in the paperwork that they should be filling in at the beginning of the year with the application form, because you as a teacher cannot every time be running to parents and asking them to sign and give you permission for assessing their children. It is assumed that it should be in the paperwork at the beginning of the year that gives you carte blanche to assess the children as and when you need to. All right. And obviously, they say also that we have to provide proper planning. So we have a South African curriculum, the curriculum framework, national curriculum framework, the NCF. We need to make ourselves familiar with this as well as with the ELDA in the ECD setting, the early learning development areas. If you are familiar with these concepts and you are able to Google them, you can find all the different themes, all the different methods and the different milestones and curriculum assessment standards that are required from you in observing the age group which you are working with. Remember, very, very importantly, you need to assess them according to the age group that they are working with. You cannot go and start an assessment out of nowhere. It has to be within the framework for that age group according to the national curriculum frameworks. All right, we go on to our next slide now. Types of recording. So the first one is anecdotal recording, and these are brief summaries or reports of an incident that has already happened. They are used to collect information about the child's development and learning experiences. They are detailed description of analyzed behaviors and events. They provide objective insight within a specific period of time. So I think some of this would also include your incident reports or your incident book that you have. You will be able to pick up a child that is always involved in some sort of an altercation or the other, and you would then set a standard for yourself to say, if in 1 month a child is involved in 5 different fights with 5 different people, this is something that needs to be investigated. The parent needs to be informed that there is possibly a problem at home that is bothering this child, or some bullying that is happening in the class, or whatever the case may be. It needs to be sorted out. Right. So here you will also be able to pick up incidences of how many times the child didn't respond to you, that you call the name, and you can pick up, for example, that the child maybe has hearing impairment. All right. So whenever you come across incidences that stand out a little bit too much to be coincidental, you're going to be recording this. Remember, I said that one of our teachers are very smart, and she has a book that is very colorful, and she records in there things that stand out and are a little bit too coincidental to be a coincidence, basically. All right. And that is how she knows when there is most probably a problem. Remember, it's difficult to remember 30 children every day doing different things. So when we record, when we document, when we observe children and we document that down in our findings, we are able to then go back and retract our steps to say, okay, this child started fighting from the 3rd of May. And I promise you 10 to 1 on the 3rd of June, if there are 5 incidences, you can call up that parent and parent will tell you something happened at home on the 1st or on the 2nd of May. And that is why the child has been reacting the way the child has been reacting. All right, we go on to our next slide now. So what are the advantages of anecdotal recording? They are quick and simple to write. They give personalized insight on the children's strengths and weaknesses. They give an idea of effectiveness of the learning methods and the intervention. Right. Next slide. Running records. So here we're speaking about records that are compiled during assessment stages that provide a more detailed account of the child's behavior in specific situations. They are raw and have limited amount of editing. All right. So whatever we're coming across in the lesson today, I want us to make notes of it. And please go on to YouTube. Please go on to Google and read up some more information about it so we can familiarize ourselves, because the lesson tonight is very concise, very brief. Next slide, please. Okay, so we're still speaking about anecdotal recording or documentation, and we're saying some of the advantages are that they provide insight onto who, what, where, and how. It's ideal for tracking a child's development over time, and the evidence is documented as and when it occurs. Eyewitness news, basically. All right. Next slide, please, Pedro. Okay. We're saying again that these are used to determine milestones in different developmental domains. They are used to track individual progress. Developmental domains are things that children should be able to do at a certain age, and these milestones include playing, learning, movement, and speech. All right, in South Africa, we are very fortunate, guys. All our work is basically done for us. You don't have to go and think up questions in the ECD section on what exactly it is you are going to be testing these children on. You may have to think up different activities to get these outcomes from the children, but they will tell you exactly in the curriculum what it is that the child needs to be able to achieve, or what it is that you need to assess. All right. Next slide, please. Some red flags to look out for. So here again, remember we said according to the age, the children are going to be assessed. So for a 12-month-old, a 1-year-old child, if the child is struggling with gesturing or blabbing or trying to say something, not making any sounds, that is a red flag for us to look out. We need to understand why this child is not blabbing or trying to make sounds or trying to mimic. There's no words coming out of the child's mouth. All right. At 15 months, little interest in interacting with those around them, because at this age, a child should be very curious of everything and everybody around them. They should be walking already, and they should be inquisitive about their environment and the people around them. And then around about 18 months, a red flag would be they don't notice when the caregiver leaves the room or comes back. They don't notice. Something's terribly wrong here with the child's development or with the child's attachment issues. All right. And 2-year-old, we said a red flag to look out is that they struggle to follow simple instructions or directions. Remember, simple instructions consist of only one order that you are giving the child. You cannot, for a 2-year-old child, tell the child, I need you to stand up, walk 5 steps, clap 3 times, jump, turn around, come to me, give the apple to Nandi. You can't do that. You are going to assess the child according to simple instructions. If the child can't follow simple instructions of saying, take the apple and give it to Nandi, if the child can't do that, there is a problem, because at that point, the child should have that much cognition. All right. Next slide, please, Pedro. All right. It seems like we have come to the end of our lesson. As an activity for yourself, you need to do a little bit of scribbling there on your pages. Explain the difference between running records and anecdotal records. And just to give you a reminder, remember, the one is ongoing, continuous assessments throughout the day, the little book that you keep, right? Number 2, we say discuss ways in which development sheets should be used. And number 3, explain the difference between assessment and observation and diagnosis. All right. We have a question from Lerato. I think a survey can be used to gather information for assessment by means of specific and targeted questions. Let's say, for example, when carrying out an assessment on social emotional development, you can pose questions like, does the child show affection for familiar people? Can the child wait for their turn during activities in a game? Yeah, I think you could have a point there, Lerato. I was just thinking of a survey more in a generalized form. But yeah, that's interesting to know. Thanks for that input, Lerato. And that's the end of me, Pedro. I think that's our shortest class we've ever done.
All right, let me just see. Yeah, it seems like that is it. All right, perfect. So let me just see. Have you been through the chat box? You have. All right, nobody has any questions? Anybody? No questions? Perfect. And then I think I can give you back the time that the remainder of the time, I'll give it back to you guys. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Sophia, so much for conducting this lovely class. And we will see you guys again in 2 weeks from now for our next session. Thank you so much, everybody, and have a lovely evening.
Thanks, Pedro. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you. Bye.